Hello, Chelsea fans of the internet. I'm your local blue here. Devastated to say the least because of the recent sacking of Frank Lampard. And as much as you wanted it to happen, as much as people knew it was going to happen, it still leaves you shocked to say the least because of, you recognize him as a player who did so much for Chelsea, and now he's just been thrown out of the club in a quite ungraceful way because of the recent events that have been happening. He hasn't been performing to the standards that we want him to. It was looking very bleak for him months ago, starting from December when we were on that losing form, and I think that's what eventually led to his downfall. And it's just very upsetting to see as a Chelsea fan. As you can hear from my voice, I'm not particularly too happy, even though I said in my Leicester reaction that I wanted him out because you have to understand what Frank Lampard is to Chelsea. Like, I grew up watching him, and a lot of people grew up watching him, and he was like the soul of everything that around Chelsea. Like, he was basically our talisman. He was the person who did so much for Chelsea. He was the captain during the 2012 Champions League, that famous night in Munich. But it's very sad to see that he's leaving. And as much as I wanted him to go, I'm still very upset. I think that's what perfectly encapsulates everything that I'm feeling right now. Um, and as you can see, like, I'm struggling to find words because it's just very hard to describe what exactly Chelsea fans are feeling right now. For a majority of them, for the people who supported Lampard, and even though I was bad mouthing him in the Leicester game, I didn't really know that he was going to get sacked as soon as he did, especially after considering that we played against Luton. I was expecting like he was going to go on a form of games, like he was going to have at least a few games to determine his fate, but unfortunately he was sacked before he could do any of that. And although it's harsh, I think it's a move that was best for the club because we needed a change. All right, we needed to find our ways again, and if that meant we had to replace the manager, then I did. But nonetheless, does that make the pain of losing Frank any more softer? Because I feel like losing Frank Lampard, someone who was part of Chelsea for so long, and someone who, when he announced that he was going to become manager in 2019, he was something that we were all looking forward to. We had a dream of Frank Lampard leading a Chelsea team that could one day be successful, and he could one day become a good manager. And I still believe that he could, but it's not going to be at Chelsea, unfortunately. Um, Regarding the problems and the reasons why he was sacked, he when he came in, he had a job to guide this Chelsea team, this crumbling Chelsea team. Like, we just lost our manager. Sorry, we lost Eden Hazard. We had a transfer ban placed on us, and there wasn't really too much to expect from the new Chelsea side of next season. But when Frank Lampard was announced as a new manager, you're suddenly like, you feel like there's a little bit of hope, especially when you consider that someone so beloved in the club is coming back, and he's going to try to inspire all the new youngsters that he was going to eventually bring. That was something very exciting at the time, and I'll never forget those games where he, despite all the odds, he was able to put up a fight, and that's what was so entertaining of last season, of how much he was guiding this team that he never worked with before. And considering he wasn't a manager for so long, considering he wasn't very experienced, that he could go on and do amazing things with this club. But I think as much as people didn't like last season, I thought he was successful, and he did manage to do things that most managers couldn't do given these players and given these circumstances. He did well, but what got him out of a job was purely because of this season, and also what it meant for last season, like some underlying principles. Uh, as much as we credited Frank with the success of last season, I still believe that he caused most of the problems of last season as well. Like, we weren't expected to do well, and because of that, the expectations were set pretty low, and that kind of like covered or concealed some of the faults of Lampard, and especially in this season, those faults prevailed, and that's what eventually got him the sack. But you still have to be sad that Frank's leaving, but I'll talk about right now because I'm like getting off track a little bit. I'll talk about now the faults that were apparent when he was manager. Now, it goes without saying that he wasn't the man that was supposed to be placed in charge of all of these new players. And even though he wanted those players and the board got him those players, he really didn't know or find a way to get them all playing under one system. In fact, rarely did he even show that he had one system. Throughout both seasons, it just looked like we were behind him and wanted to just assure we just wanted some success from him. It's not like we were placing high demands on him, and that was very apparent throughout last season because we weren't a team that always won, and it was just like what were we doing sometimes? It's like we had our players and they did their things, and what else could you expect? Like we didn't have the best squad last season, but now we do, and obviously when you have those players that you just bought for over 200 million, you're expected to do something, but um, that's something that Frank Lampard couldn't do, and I would say that's all because of his tactic side of things. Like he had the perfect character for a Chelsea manager. He was young, he was inspiring, he was loved by all the fans and adored by the players that he ended up signing. But in terms of tactics, in terms of management skills, those were lacking, and I wouldn't blame Lampard for not having any of those. But if you want to be a manager and you want to be successful, then you definitely need those qualities. And as much time as we gave him and as much time people were willing to give him still, it just wasn't enough for him to, to prove himself at the end. And it's just very disappointing to say the least. Now, from my perspective, I was very hopeful for the season. I thought, because I didn't realize the problems before, I thought that Lampard would suddenly flourish under these new players that he just bought, and I thought things were going to look very good for us throughout the season. But as much as we were hopeful, it just wasn't clear to us that there were a lot of problems when it came to the tactics, and a lot of times throughout the season did we really look like a good opposition for other teams. It looked like we were very stale, we didn't really have a game plan, and we were very dull in our attacks. And I think those are the main reasons that Lampard ended up losing his job, because he wasn't able to use these players properly, and he didn't really instill a game plan that they could follow. Now, I'm not saying that because he spent so much money and he wasn't able to do anything with the players and give us immediate success. I don't think he's fired for that reason. I think that he's fired because in terms of his management skills, he's very lacking, and we need someone to actually guide these players, someone who has been experienced enough to know what these players can play, knows different types of football. But clearly Lampard's too inexperienced for that, and it's no surprise that he's losing his job because he clearly doesn't know enough in terms of a managerial side, despite how much of a legend he was playing football. And it goes without saying that this is probably one of the toughest days of being a Chelsea fan. As much as I wanted him gone, it still feels very upsetting for me. And obviously, from my tone of voice, you can hear that I didn't cry or anything, but I just feel like a little out of emotion because we basically start from square one again. And what's expected of the future? Who knows if we're building up to anything anymore? Who knows if the players that we got will even start anymore? Who knows what happens to the youngsters? It becomes very, very confusing and very, very skeptical about the future. But hopefully the new manager, Tuchel, will guide us in the future. Okay, so it turns out I butchered that name. It's pronounced Tuchel, and I really hope that he can, show a new pattern of playing football. And obviously we hope that the quality gets better overall. But whether he's going to inspire much into the players or if he's going to be beloved as Frank Lampard was in the Chelsea community is still a thought to be pondered on, because we don't really know how he's going to do. We know that he's a much more experienced manager, but will he get us the results? And if he doesn't give us the results, then who will? Then that becomes very worrying for the future. But as of now, I am very optimistic because not only did we get rid of Frank Lampard, we have these new set of players who will actually learn to thrive under this new manager. And as much as that pains me to say that, because as much as I wanted Lampard to succeed in Chelsea, and as much as I wanted the players to succeed under him, I don't think that was ever going to happen anytime soon, unless unless the board were willing to give him so much more time. But at that point, we would have to go through countless defeats, and I don't know if everyone's on board with that. Obviously, seeing the news, no, not enough people were on board in that. Not enough people wanted to see that. And it's clear because you don't want to see your team lose every week. You want to see them winning, but that's just a fine line between your affection for the players and the manager and the club. It's a very thin line, and you always have to do what's best for the club in the end. You can't rely on favoritism. You can't really say, "Oh, this manager, because he's done so much for the club, or because I love him so much that he has to be the one to do it. He has to be." It just doesn't work like that. You want results, so you get rid of the people who are bringing you down, and unfortunately, Lampard was that person. So that's basically me talking about his legacy on Chelsea, at Chelsea, and it's very, very upsetting. I really don't know how else to react other than I'm gutted. I'm, dispelled of any passion that was before. No, once he was appointed as manager, it's just all gone. And I'm sorry if this is if this is just me going on one big soliloquy, or just me spouting my thoughts, but I just needed this discussion between myself and you, the viewers, just to think about what Lampard did for us and to remind ourselves that he was, in the end, someone that we were behind for so long, and it's very sad to see everything crumbling down before us. But we still have the players, we have a new manager, and all we can do is hope for the best. I hate saying that because it makes us, the fans, seem like we can only do so much and we can't really change how things are. But as much as we wanted Lampard to stay, I think it was the right decision for him to leave, and I can only hope for the best for him. I hope he does well in other managerial careers that he has in other clubs. And if he ever does come back to Chelsea, it'd probably not be as a manager. It'd probably be like at a coach, like who knows. But or a director like Petr Cech, but who knows at this point. It's very, very bleak subject, and I don't think people want to discuss Lampard's departure for too long, because it does make some fans very upset. So if you did watch this video of me discussing, or I guess ranting, or whatever it is, just like spilling my thoughts out in a very sad manner, as you could tell, thank you. Leave a comment, subscribe to your local blue, like the video. Despite how hard it might seem, like who would want, what kind of Chelsea fan would want to like this video on someone discussing something tragic as Lampard's leaving? But if you can show support to me, then please do so. In any case, I've been your local blue, and I'm probably gonna spend like the next few days just just taking in all this news, releasing a lot of emotion, and yeah, peace.